Folks, welcome to an episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan, he is Mac.
Howdy.
And this is a show where we look at different pieces of art and try to ascertain and learn, more about the art and ourselves.
Ascertain, Danny.
And this week, this was Mac's selection. We are doing a documentary from the year of our Lord 2018. It's a documentary on Netflix. It is called Wild Wild Country, directed by Chapman and McLean Way, and it is about Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh.
Way like the protein?
Sorry?
Like way like the protein, like W-H-E-Y?
W-A-Y. Thank you for disrupting me. And then it's Rajneesh, later known as Osho, and the growth of his religion, as well as the building and sort of taking down in a way, not literally, but in a way, metaphorically, of said town in Oregon, in the middle of nowhere next to this town, Antelope. And it's this sort of all these intertwining stories that sort of just go together. And it's like a spider web that just happens with everything that is involved. Before we, Mac, get into, why you selected this, because I'm very glad that you did, because it is a fantastic piece.
Thank you.
The brief story behind the directors reaching upon this was they were in the middle of making the documentary that they made in 2014 called The Battered Bastards of Baseball, which is about a minor league baseball team that was owned by Kurt Russell's dad. Yes, that Kurt Russell. And while they were in Oregon, there was, and this is all according to the Hollywood Reporter, an interview that they had with them, and there was a guy in Oregon who had all this archival footage that helped them with the documentary and was wondering what they were going to do next, and suggested to them, well, there's all this crazy shit that happened in the 80s that is profoundly unbelievable, that involves a growth of a religion, then a giant poisoning and wiretapping case, and is something that is still sort of trickled out to this day. And then also the founder of Nike was involved as well. So that's how they started this, because when you were a documentarian, and in a way, when you are a documentarian, you are a sort of journalist. You can't turn away from a story like that.
Absolutely. And it's shocking that it's such a little known story, because it was something that was national news when it happened.
Yeah. And so, we all know, that's presumptive a little bit, but when I say we all, generally speaking, a lot of us know about Jonestown.
Yeah.
And the literal drinking of Kool-Aid to poison everybody that lived in Jonestown. And that was a cult that preceded this one that is done in Rajneeshpuram, which is the town they built in Oregon. And it precedes that, and so then in the 80s, of course, it gave everybody a spook of oh my god, a cult is happening before our eyes, and this is just like Jonestown.
Yeah.
And so, Mac, I want to get into, why did you select this? How did you stumble upon this? Because this is such a fascinating documentary that takes its time through 6 episodes, and it was definitely 6 episodes that was needed. It didn't feel like there was any fat that was left on the bone.
No.
This was something that was just, in a way, eloquently done to near perfection. But how did you find this? How did you stumble upon this? Why did you pick this?
Ooh, that's a good question. I actually don't remember how I found it. I think I accidentally stumbled upon it. No. I was bored.
The changing of minds.
I just remembered. I just now remembered.
Yeah.
I was bored my junior year of college, I believe.
It's only
maybe
3
senior
years ago
year
or something like that.
Yeah.
And the documentary came out in 2018, so makes sense.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And I was looking up, because I just finished The Get Down, which is another awesome show on Netflix. I was looking up, because Netflix was the only streaming service that I had at that time, other things that were on Netflix that were really good. And so I found a bunch of lists that were talking about the best things that Netflix had to offer. And on every single list, I saw Wild Wild Country, but I had no idea what it was about at all. And it kept saying, "Oh, it's fantastic. It's like a triumph and all this stuff." I had no idea what it was about. I decided to take a watch. First 2 episodes are slower than the rest. Not bad, but slower than the rest. And so I was actually pretty tempted to give it a rest after the second episode.
Interesting.
Yeah. The first watch.
Because so the intro that they have in the very first episode, which is like 10 minutes in, is they do this like montage of a bunch of like spliced footage of like footage that is maybe like gathered at the site, or just like anything involving like the court cases that were litigiously involved with this whole thing. Like, it's all like this crazy montage that's spliced together, and I was like, holy shit, how far down the rabbit hole does this go?
Yeah.
So I mean, in that moment I was hooked. Like, I couldn't turn away. So I'm fascinated by the fact that you, at least at the end of episode 2, you were like, like you were able to have the opportunity to put it down. I guess I'm just fascinated by that fact.
Yeah, and it really did. It really did take that montage that you were talking about to remind me. As I was thinking about it, I was like, I know this picks up eventually, and apparently it's amazing. So I really do need to finish this one out. But yeah. So I mean, I'm glad I ended up watching it all the way through. The second that I watched it the first time, I showed it to my girlfriend. I showed it to my mom. I showed it to everyone that I possibly could.
You really like showing other people stuff that you consume.
I do. I do. Especially whenever I really think it's interesting or worth talking about.
Absolutely.
I don't really care if it's good or bad. I just like talking about things. And this one especially has provided hours of conversation with a lot of people that I know. I think I even got your girlfriend to watch it at one point. I was getting everyone to watch it. It's fantastic. So I'm shocked that it took us this long to come around to it, but I'm glad that we are finally here. Now, one thing that you said that I'm specifically interested in, you called it a religion a few times. You would classify this as a religion.
Okay, yes, because and I know probably the follow-up that you're gonna ask, it's because the founder of this religion then later on in his life said this is not a religion.
Yeah.
But it's total it's totally,
it's a religion for sure.
And at the very least, it's a way of life. And sort of what the basis of this is, for those of you who don't know, is that it's a very sort of sex liberating, idealized focus on life and joy and happiness and freeing yourself from some of the shackles that we put on ourselves in regards to like the relationships that we have with each other and our bodies. Now, this isn't the sort of like, and the commune that they build too, this isn't the sort of thing where they completely close themselves off to society. Not at all. All these people are still very much in tune and know what the hell is going on in the lives around them.
Absolutely.
They have TVs, they get newspapers. There's still, they get crazy Rolls Royces. They are still very much so.
They're very connected to the town
connected
closest to.
Yeah.
Closest to them.
And then, but connected to the world at large. They are aware of current events. Like they are not closing themselves off, but they are opening themselves
while
to
they were at
new life.
While they were at Rajneeshpuram, they sent representatives to go and do interviews around the country to promote.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but at the very least, like, if it isn't like a religion, then it's a way of life. And if it's not a way of life, then it's just simply a cult and or business, and or actually both. So that's the thing. So I understand, like, I feel like when you start a religion, then you say this isn't a religion, but then you're also having so many people quite literally like worship you at every step and believe that like your life is going to take a course. And then it's also, you're talking doomsday scenarios with your disciples. Like, it's one of those things that you don't get to make that choice in a way, whether or not that's a religion.
One thing you used a word that I am so happy that you used, worship, because that really is the textbook definition of religion.
Yeah, way to hit your microphone, by the way.
No, party foul.
Nice work. He was scratching his right arm, and then he just hit the shock mount.
But I think because of the shock mount, it probably didn't pick up too much.
Okay. I don't believe
He said there's no way.
There's no way.
Oh my gosh. The playbacks can
Do you edit these? Do you edit these?
No.
Thank you.
I don't edit audio. Okay? I used to, but not anymore.
Yeah.
Because you're way better at editing audio than I am. Yes, the textbook definition of religion is the worshiping of a god or godlike figure.
Sure.
So what is it that they worship?
Oh, I mean, it's Rajneesh.
Yeah.
It's Bhagwan.
Right.
You know, and then later on Osho. Like what's so interesting, it's easily my favorite part about this documentary. I'm gonna tie it to what we're talking about at this current moment. Is how they allow you, the viewer, to come up with your own opinion on everything.
Yes.
So they have, multiple people who were working the cases against Bhagwan. You have multiple people that lived in the town Antelope right next to the commune that was built. You have multiple people that was living in the commune. Some of those still love Bhagwan. Some of them still, follow Bhagwan even after he left Oregon.
A lot.
And then some, like, how they separated from that whole cult as well. But there is what's the best part about this is that you actually see the beauty and the destruction, that came with this, like, worshipment, right? And so the thing is about this religion that was created too was that it was, and you know what? Maybe this is a sizzle serve. Perhaps I'm going to put the feelers out there.
Sizzle serve.
You say that, but maybe this isn't a sizzle serve because what I'm going to say is that
I'll try to disagree.
Bhagwan was just 2,000 years too late.
I totally agree.
But like this is just a religion that, like, when we look at other religions and we look at the persecution that they go through, and then in response to the persecution occasionally, or the wish to spread religion, then, like, violence is also a thing that comes up pretty frequently, and that's a thing in multiple religions throughout the history of man.
Yeah.
I mean, the Crusades is the best example easily.
Yes.
So it's and the directors don't really sort of put that out there specifically, that sort of, like, hypocrisy right there. But there's, I feel like you can pick up on it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so
there was a really interesting quote a while back that I can't remember who said it.
Great.
Suck. I know.
I'm on the case.
It's basically cults are just religions that haven't stood the test of time. It is the idea being that all religions start as a group of people that follow something that no one else is believing.
Right.
Or that no one else wants to believe.
And that everyone views taboo.
Right.
Cult is just a negative connotation. And by the way, that quote was Frank Zappa. The only difference between a cult and a religion is the amount of real estate they own.
That's good.
And I don't know if that was the exact one that you were trying to quote.
But that's the same idea.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's at the core of, like, what's going on here. We're not even, like, discussing the morality of what's going on, with the town of Rajneeshpuram and everybody who presided in it and everybody who presided without it. But at the end of the day, whether or not what they were doing was good or bad, because they were different, they're going to be looked at differently. And because this religion wasn't a thing 2,000 years before, and because this religion was happening right now at this moment, and when I say right now at this moment, I mean the 80s, there were, of course, going to be people that are like, that makes me uncomfortable. That goes against my sensibilities and everything that I stand for personally, even though, in a way, some of them did not want to be involved. But it's what is even doubly more interesting is just to see the human turmoil, I suppose is the word. Specifically, this documentary short series focuses a lot on one individual that is still alive in particular, Ma Anand Sheela. Sheela was the secretary to Bhagwan for the longest time, multiple years, and was at his beck and call and basically did everything in the name of Bhagwan. And then, so what it also becomes is that when she then felt that her back was up against the wall in some situations, then she would turn to more aggressive tactics, which would then eventually lead to the poisoning and the sedating of multiple homeless people, the poisoning and causing a salmonella outbreak, the conspiracy to kill U.S. senators and attorneys. It's this whole thing that occurs that it's what brings me so much just I want to fucking just bite my teeth into it is that whole journey for her tracks in a way. The storytelling in this documentary is immaculate because of that. Because of course none of us are going to agree with Sheela at all. What Sheela did was absolutely wrong. And also the fact that she feels no empathy is also kind of terrifying for all the horrible things that she conspired and actually did do, right? She has no regret about so much of it. That is terrifying. But we can absolutely see how this tracks for her, that she finds herself to be devoted to one individual, doing everything in the name for him, even at something as grand as building a city from nothing, which is amazing.
She was asked in an interview 3 years ago, why she went about poisoning the people at the salad bar the way that she did. And her response to that was, I don't want to discuss that. And they said, why not? And then she said, because I served 39 months in prison and for attempted murder, and that should be, she did. And she said,
yes,
that should be enough. Sorry.
Hold on. I gave Mac a glance, not because I was shocked by the fact of, like, she spent 39 months in prison, which is, I mean, also not very long considering, like, what she did. Yeah. But it was more so, like, what is he going to say? So I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I feel like I had to mention.
No, it was funny. It was very funny. Just seeing your face. Yeah, and she just said, I spent 39 months in prison. I shouldn't be punished for it my whole life. Which it's very similar to most of the things that they preach in their, and I will call it a religion. I agree with it fundamentally, but there's also part of me that's like, I mean, why can't you just talk about it? You know, like,
sure. Well, I mean, but then what is also interesting is that, like, for this documentary, then but still discusses so much of it.
Yeah.
But also what it feels like is that all this info that we got of Sheela and what she conspired to do was not from Sheela.
Yeah.
Was from the attorneys that were working on the cases, were from the townsfolk, and what they found out were from Jane Stork.
I was about to say
who
Jane.
was then known as Shanti B. And
Jane ends up being like the dark horse.
The secretary to the secretary,
Jane
essentially.
ends up being maybe the superstar of this documentary series.
Because what makes Jane so interesting is that she attempted murder against somebody, the personal doctor to Bhagwan, and she is unsuccessful. But, like, she realizes at some point, oh my God, I need to free myself from this and what I was doing. What I did was absolutely horrendous.
Like, her story is the most dramatically interesting.
Yes.
And so it's very easy to find yourself getting closer and closer to her and more interested in what she's doing and what she has to say.
And what makes Jane fundamentally, and I'm going to use the term character, like these are real people. I understand that. I know that in the context of like the story,
right.
in a way they are like characters, but what made Jane's character, quote unquote, so much stronger was actually how that was counter to Niren. And who Niren was that he was basically also the personal lawyer of Bhagwan and the entire estate, and then became mayor later on of the town. And he was still very much so devoted to Bhagwan even after he left Oregon when Jane was not. And even more so that Niren is not his birth name.
It's Philip Toix.
Yes. And then Jane, she goes back to her birth name. And so it's this beautiful sort of mirror that we're looking at for the two, where they both, in a way, they both still love Bhagwan, right? But it was like their relationship to him and their relationship with Sheela and their relationship with the commune was completely different as well.
The weirdest thing is that there is no one throughout this entire documentary, or anyone that I've seen outside of the context of the documentary, even in like interviews and whatnot, that there's no one that started loving the Bhagwan that ever stopped.
Yeah.
Everyone that loved him at some point still to this day loves him.
Even
or
for
loved
Jane,
him to their deathbed.
where like some of this just haunts her.
She's like, I mean, it was crazy, but it was also some of the best years of my life, and I still have so much love for Osho.
And
it's
what
crazy.
And what makes this so fascinating too is the sort of two sides of the same coin that this documentary is constantly showing you. It's fantastic that all these people came together to build a town out of nothing.
Yeah.
It is also a little bit shameful that it's infringing on the town that's literally next door and not considering, what those townspeople want for the lives that they have and already the small town that they have.
Right.
That Bhagwan can be a con man, but he can also, if he was a con man, but he can also be this sort of like hope that he gives to people. It can be both.
Mm-hmm.
And so the documentary doesn't tell you to think one way or the other.
Yes.
It just gives you this information to think on your own. So whether or not you believe Niren, for example, Niren is a wonderful individual or not is really fascinating, because it's like all the things he did was really, really good, in a way, like intrinsically good things, and how he believed in Bhagwan as well, and how he wanted to protect, Bhagwan and other people. And then also, like, he was a big part of this cult as well. And so, like, what's that to say about everything that surrounds him and him himself? Sorry, go ahead.
No. I got really emotional seeing Niren get emotional about just the potential, Seeing him talk about, this could have been so great, and it was so close if people like Sheela didn't fuck it up for everybody.
In a way,
which I kind of understand and agree with. What's interesting is that really a lot of people, it seems, agree with his perspective there, that most people that have talked about Sheela outside of the Bhagwan didn't really like her all that much. The only reason that people put up with her is because Osho just didn't worship her. No, I was about to say that. That's not accurate.
But was
really
always,
gassed her up.
Yeah.
Gave her a lot of credit. Gave her a lot of ethos.
And authority.
A lot of authority. And kept telling people, like, she has the authority.
She's
like,
the
listen to her.
mouthpiece for me.
Exactly. Which, it kind of became clear that was intentional on his part, that he made her bad cop and him good cop.
Oh, for sure. And so that,
and that's how people kept loving him.
Well, and this is something that you see in like corruption a lot too, where or at least like stories that involve corruption, is you have this leader of sorts, but they have everybody below them do all the work, so it never falls back on the leader. And so I think it's fair to say that it's highly extremely likely that Bhagwan had a hand or at least some involvement in a lot of the stuff that Sheela did, or at least like, hey, I want you to make this happen, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
By any
Funny
means
enough,
necessary.
This is a directing strategy. No joke.
A directing strategy?
We talk about this in directing, and it's something that I use all the damn time when directing. You get either an assistant director or a stage manager, probably stage manager, safest bet, that can be a dick. And they're the pushy one. They're the one that always is on the actor's case. They're always that. Because could you be that as a director? Yes. And like that's like it's still possible to direct a show decently that way. But specifically if you're working on a show that isn't like you need a lot of collaboration. You need a lot of give from the actors.
Yeah.
You have to work really hard at managing your relationship with the actors, and it's impossible to like accurately and effectively manage your relationship with them if you have to be a dick all the time. So you offload all of that bad cop energy onto some sort of stage manager, and then you continue being the good guy, even though you're the one telling the stage manager to be a dick. You have to keep that status as the good guy that you can come to because we have to work together, and you have to be able to trust me. Because you have to be emotionally vulnerable to do your job.
And once again, it's like it's the two sides of the same coin there. I mean, even in that example, like it's regardless of whether or not the director or the SM, the stage manager, is fulfilling that role, like, but they're still like aiding in towards the production. And then like to bring it back to Sheela, like she did all of those awful things, and then now is also helping people with dementia and schizophrenia and older individuals in a home, right? Like it's just
it's the Roald Dahl thing.
It makes it so fascinating, that like people are insanely complicated. And so what's really interesting as well is that when you have the first episode be a lot about like the growth of the religion and the growth of the town and all the beautiful things that they're doing, and then you start the second episode with Weaver, which is one of the U.S. attorneys that worked on the case against Bhagwan, saying this was evil. Like just that blatantly, like he wanted to make that clear that this was evil.
Yeah.
It's such crazy, but it's like a story that like when you have something like that to showcase complicated human beings, you have to tell that story, and I'm happy that story was told in this fashion. I
completely agree, and I would really like to talk more about Sheela, especially because she is the most interesting character. Maybe not the best, but the one that is most interesting for sure.
Oh my God, freaking! Wow.
I know, my vibrator goes off.
Your vibrating phone.
No, as my vibrating goes off. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm riffing here, Danny.
That was awful. We're going to break.
We'll go to break. We'll see you later. And welcome back. Anyways, so Danny, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Sheela. Oh
my God.
What?
Oh, that was just bordering. You were just playing a dangerous game there. That's all I'm gonna say.
I was all I'm gonna say.
Listen, it's okay. Hey, listen to me. You don't have to explain. I'm just letting you.
It'd probably be better if I didn't.
Yes. What do you think I'm doing right now?
Saving me.
Yes. Now, what were you gonna say about Sheela?
What I was gonna say about Sheela, she had a lot of people that were in the cult that hated her guts. That were perfectly aware of what she was doing, right? I actually have two different quotes from people that were in the community, but that were not shown in the documentary. People that were just there, just regular citizens. Because as you saw, there were thousands of people that were living there that were never shown at all in the documentary, right?
And crazy impressive, just like the infrastructure and the size and like what it took to put that town together. It's genuinely a beautiful thing that happened. Like that's genuinely beautiful that many people were able to collaborate, work together, and build something amazing. So, but please go ahead with these quotes that you're about to read.
There was a person named Surendra.
Okay.
That is currently living in as a photographer in Japan. They grew up in East London and they lived at Rajneeshpuram for 9 months.
Okay.
And was like one of the people that were working 12-hour days, like to build, like they were building a lot, right? And what they said is,
and he doesn't even. Here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing: is that Mac's phone goes off again. It goes off again in this segment, and he doesn't even put it on Do Not Disturb. He doesn't even turn it off. He doesn't even do anything. He does not even learn his lesson in regards to anything.
Look.
But anyways,
it was an Amber Alert.
So you were talking about.
Amber was screaming at me. There was I was talking about. Sorry, the quote. The quote reads this: Sheela was an unusual sannyasin. She was a politician with a politician's ability.
Yeah.
That was very, very clear in the perspective of the people.
Yeah. But in a way, that was her job as well. And so of course, some people are going to be uncomfortable by that as well. But part of Sheila's job was to essentially be the spokesperson for Bhagwan and to have all those press meetings and put in the good word for sannyasins, and sannyasins is just people who follow that religion, what they call themselves, and for Rajneeshpuram. Obviously, she did a very poor job on that, and basically, because even though, let me just say, she antagonized a lot of people.
She did.
And so when you are making a new religion, and you're having this thing pop out of nowhere, and you have everybody involved in your religion wear red and these beaded necklaces, and of course, like, I understand that's, once again, all this sort of tracks, right? Where a lot of this aggression starts with the bombing of the hotel that a lot of sannyasins were in, but all the same, like, people aren't going to see that, and so very clearly she puts a target on everybody's back, per se, for this town, and so, of course, she has to weave through all these things, but she also weaves through everything in the town as well. And so when you have this one person who speaks for all of you, and maybe you don't agree with her, of course, there's going to be a little bit of headbutting, per se. And what's the second quote that you have?
Noah Maxwell. Noah Maxwell was a child that lived in Rajneeshpuram. That I think he was like 10 or 11 whenever he lived there.
Okay.
And he grew up. And eventually started to talk to. This one is from The Guardian. There's an entire article just about Noah Maxwell's experience.
Yeah.
And he said that his memory of Sheela is that she was an extremely confident person and was pretty funny, but and this is a quote, but I also knew, because I would hear from my parents, that she was ruthless. And I think it was clear the power that she had over the people and Bhagwan. Interesting.
Yeah.
That it was clear to everyone.
Yeah.
In the entire community, that everyone knew.
But it's also the sort of thing where then everybody's put in a tough position.
Yeah.
Because she's Bhagwan's secretary and spokesperson. Right. So if you do anything bad to her, then it's gonna come back to you.
Right.
They allude to it in like the final episode as well, that was a regular thing that happened to people living in the commune.
Yeah.
That we have Sunshine was her name. That was her given sannyasin name, and also I think like her name is Sunny as well. But there was a moment where she grabbed all of the roses that sat on the hood of a Rolls Royce that Bhagwan was driving, and the next day she got like really bad sort of food poisoning. Like, this was supposedly a common thing that happened for a lot of the individuals in this commune, where if Sheela felt that Bhagwan was going to, like, not, I don't want to say groom them, but had a favor towards them. Sheela tried her best to put that shit down and have everything in her power to put that shit down. And like how that happens, of course, is when like then Sheela got a very tight knit group of people to devote themselves to her, and one of them being Jane.
Yep.
And so it's just like how I'm so sorry, but how this whole thing unravels is not only is the story so interesting and just so fascinating, and I'm so happy that it's a story that was told, but it's also the storytelling of it, of watching everything be unwound. It's honestly a masterclass in documentary storytelling. I know I fumbled on that word for some reason. I had a stroke in the middle of that word. I was trying to find some sort of adverb or something, but it's truly a sort of like masterclass in regards to all of that, and they painted very clearly that totally makes sense. Sheela had that power, and people were in essence afraid.
Well, a lot of
Sheela.
Documentaries back themselves into a corner, and not intentionally, but purely because they don't have the resources to interview the bad guys. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Most of the time they have a good guy and a bad guy in a documentary, or like the people that were rooting for the people that were rooting against, because we don't have the means or the resources to interview the people that were the bad guys.
And sometimes it's like documentaries like that revolve around people who are dead, and like even though Osho is dead, there are still plenty of people who were heavily involved and alive. And so even though some of the dead can't defend themselves, and you have enough of the living that can really paint the story. This isn't like a situation where I'm going to compare this to The Last Dance. For those of you who don't know, The Last Dance is a Michael Jordan documentary that was released sort of at the very beginning of the pandemic. And was the only thing that we were able to satiate ourselves with.
Yeah. And it was good. I loved Last Dance.
So that's fine. But the biggest issue with Last Dance was how Jerry Krause could not defend himself.
Right.
That Jerry Krause was dead by the time they were making this documentary, and there was so much shit talking and so much stuff that we don't know as well about Jerry Krause that it felt so fucking dirty. Yeah, everything revolving around Jerry Krause. True. But what made it makes sense for this documentary, of course, like Osho's been dead for now, like 30 plus years. Even with that, how Osho was viewed to these people, they were also still like pretty disconnected as well. And in a way, they were people who were heavily involved with Osho's life and his ongoings and what he did, so that's the thing. And like even then, like these are people that still like love Osho, the people who were heavily involved, and the people who weren't as heavily involved, or rather were on the outskirts, may them be attorneys or the people of Antelope, like they had opinions about Osho, but they were defended by the people who loved Osho. You know what I'm saying? Like nobody was defending Jerry Krause in The Last Dance. No. Nobody. No. They buried him.
They did.
In more ways than one.
Oh no, you're right though.
And so that's a thing that also like excels in this documentary. Right. I'm sorry for cutting you off with whatever thought that you were having.
No, you're absolutely right, and it really is tough that they don't have that they don't have someone to represent Jerry Krause in The Last Dance. I agree, and I wish that more documentaries had the opposite opinion. What's so awesome and so fortunate about Wild Wild Country is that they actually do. There isn't really a bad guy or a good guy because everyone thinks they're the good guy, and it was awesome to see so many different perspectives, not just because it's such a complicated topic. Every person that's there has a unique and interesting perspective. It's not like it's not like 10 people are telling us the same shit about the Bhagwan. It's that everyone has different stories and different experiences, and there is no one that is in the wrong per se, because everyone's so unbelievably justified. that you as an audience member really don't know where you lie. Go ahead.
It did not feel like Chapman and McLean Way imposed their own bias on anything. And
Right.
like specifically what they set out to do was have these people speak their truth.
And they did.
And in a way, as a journalist, right? Like, this is such a journalistically impressive documentary, and as a journalist, that's your sort of job,
Yeah.
right? And of course, like, we're all going to have these biases, and we're all going to have these stories that we want to tell and want to share and want to express, and maybe sometimes, as my bone cracks in my ankle, that sometimes, like, hey, maybe this opinion that is actually sort of, like, dangerous to share, maybe I won't share it, right? But, I mean, now, of course, this being, 40 years removed from the events as well, it's important for these people to share their truth and for the directors to allow that to take place, regardless of how these people were involved, is super duper crucial. Because when that happens, exactly, it allows you to craft your own opinion on the matters and allows you to figure out for yourself, well, then who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Is Osho really good? Is Osho really bad? Like, it allows you to figure out on your own accord, like, what you believe is right and wrong. And even more, kind of in a way, too, sort of paint the picture for you of like what would you have done if you were in Rajneesh Param? Like, what would you have done if you were in Sheela's position? What would you have done if you were in Shanti B/Jane's position? Would you also find yourself attempting to murder the doctor to the man you worship? Like these are like crazy things, but that happen to seemingly normal people. That I think what caught me so off guard about a lot of the people in Rajneesh Param was that, oh no, these people seem relatively normal. They just seem like anybody.
Yeah.
And they were just in need of something for themselves for the lives that they were living.
Yeah.
That could be anybody.
Yes.
And so, like, painting that makes us really think to ourselves, what would we have done if somebody who came up to me and was representing Bhagwan and like wanting to convert me in a way, and I don't mean that word maliciously, I mean that word because I just can't think of another word as well, but like somebody who was seeking to convert me, like, could I be converted? Could I be in a vulnerable position where I would say, yeah, I want to go to a town in the middle of nowhere in Oregon and be loved by everyone around me? Like,
yeah,
that's the picture that the documentary paints for you to look at, and that's such a fine thing to do because they didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
They could have expressed their own bias, and we'll get to you in a second, and they could have expressed their own bias of like all these things were wrong or no, all these things were right. It's like, no, let's just tell the truth of what these tell the truth of these people, right? Because they can't get the entire truth because some of that truth is dead. But let's get as much truth as we can. What were you going to say, Mac?
There really are two questions, like you said.
Yeah.
It boils down to, and I'm actually posing these to you now on behalf of the documentary.
Okay.
Do you think that you could have been swayed to be in this cult? 1, 2, do you think there is a version of yourself from here on out that someday or in some way, is it possible that you could ever be driven to attempt murder?
If I am watching this documentary and I'm seeing people like Niran or Jane or Sunshine or KD or any other sort of person that is involved with Rajneesh Param, if I'm seeing those people being able to be converted to Osho / Bhagwan, then I don't see why I couldn't, right?
Yes.
And like, I would like to believe also, And I feel like there's a cough coming in a moment, so I'm just going to warn everyone. But I feel like also that it's this slow, simmer to a boil that is like these people's actions. It was what I was talking about, that like if you said to Jane before she goes to Rajneesh Param, hey, you're going to try to kill somebody and you're going to conspire to kill a lawyer, she'd be like, no, I would never do that.
Yeah.
And so I, of course, would like to believe I would never do that. And me at this moment, I would never do that.
Yeah, right.
I can't discount the possibility of like maybe 20 years from now, I'm really down on my luck in something, and then this thing sort of just happens to me where I'm like, oh, there's hope there. Oh, I want to take my life there. Like I cannot discount that possibility. And so it speaks to the nature.
Thank you, Danny.
It speaks to the nature of like not just cults and how easy it is to be involved in cults. It also just intrinsically speaks to the nature of religion.
Yes.
And like, so me being down on my luck and like 20 years from now and trying to find hope in something, like that doesn't have to be in a cult. That can be in any form of religion that fulfills me. It just happened to be this that fulfilled those people. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the biggest key. And so what makes it interesting for the people in Antelope is that they don't necessarily have that perspective because they were so closely involved with the going-ons of the town literally next door. But like that's an important perspective to have.
Yep. Of
like it's so easy potentially to fall into that.
Yeah.
And they believe, I was really going to start that sentence off poorly. But like they view themselves and they believe in God and they worship Jesus, and they worship God and are good, faithful Christians, but also fail to see that like how they're expressing their religion is cultish behavior here and there as well. Like once again, as I drop my pen, that these things can be both. And that's so important to recognize. And so I can be a person that refrains myself from doing those awful things, or just simply refrains myself from going to a town like Rajneesh Param or just whatever sort of commune, right? But I can also be a person that does do that. But at this moment right now, that's all I know about me. I can't know 20 years in the future. If you talk to these people before they went to Rajneesh Param, they would think you're crazy.
Yeah.
But those lives were forever changed for better or for worse. And that really sticks with me for those people. And once again, it's that sort of thing. It's the entire thing tracks for a lot of those people. That's just like, this is just what I needed in the moment. And like, it's something about how he spoke. And there's something about how he just looked at me. Was just like, I'm just enthralled by who you are. And I want to worship you. And once again, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just these people loved him.
Right.
Found themselves in those positions. Sorry.
No. I agree with you that there is a lot of tie-in in relation to just general religion.
Sure.
And it just the exact same way that religion is. It's not necessarily the belief or the ideology that is the downfall. It is the human interaction and just manipulation of it. That really is the downfall. Like if you look at and one of the most fascinating things just ever is the Catholic Church.
Sure.
If you look at the Catholic Church, there are a lot of really, really good things the Catholic Church has done. And there are a lot of great people, great popes that came from the Catholic Church. There are also so many corrupt ones, so many psychopathic ones, so many disgusting ones, people and things. And they every one of them used the word of God to get whatever it was they wanted. and we're able to, and not just like we're lying about it. Not that it wasn't they were, and this is kind of touched on in the series on Netflix that just recently came out, Midnight Mass. It's not necessarily that that they are preaching one thing and then practicing something entirely different behind closed doors. It's that the thing that they are preaching can also be interpreted as something that is very malicious, just like the Hillsborough Baptist Church, that were like vividly anti-gay to the point where they believed that gays should be incarcerated and in some cases burned at the stake.
Oh,
Terrifying. But it's not that they are practicing something different than they're preaching. It's that they are using the Bible to justify that action. That's
but
crazy.
It's also what you have to keep in mind too is that it's the case of when are you having the part represent the whole, right? And so like I'm sure like in the case of like some really awful priests in Catholic faith, or like just gonna use the example of like there were, many years ago there were like a huge scandal of priests who were consistently molesting children.
But
and yeah, which is wow, holy shit, poor phrasing. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Oh, you son of a bitch.
Oh no. Okay, which is
yikes, that hurt.
Which is disgust in is the central core
Disgust
of the
is
movie.
How I describe myself.
Spotlight.
Right
And I'm so sorry. And right, but there are some people that have that part represent the whole, that what those priests did represent, okay, I cannot trust the Catholic faith, right? That there are definitely going to be some people that look at what Sheela did and said, okay, I'm not going to trust this religion at all. I'm not going to trust this sort of practice at all. There are still going to be some people that do that. And as now I seamlessly transition into very briefly and very quickly into just a heady play that was just in the actual doing of this documentary and the actual editing of it. What was so brilliantly and well bleeping done was, and there's a lot of archival footage. There's a lot of old footage in this documentary, of course. What is so great is when, let's say, for example, there's an interview that's going on in some of this old footage, and then they're kind of splicing together it, right? They're editing it together where, the person says one thing, but then they say the one thing and then they cut to a quote later on in the same interview. So what they do, this sort of like editing effect that it looks like it's on an old TV and somebody just hit the side of the TV, of the TV, right? It's this sort of like static that happens that it's actually like a very cool and neat editing trick to get to another part in the documentary. It is like, I didn't notice it at first, but I was like, oh wait, they just cut there. But that cut was so like artistically done. They did not have to do that, but it was like it actually enriched of like, we're looking into the past a little bit. Yeah. We are looking into the past currently, and we're in a way we're now like sitting in the present and thinking about the future, but it's like it's this piece of the past that's still living in a way. I don't know how to describe it, but it was that sort of like idea that really stuck with me because of that editing trick, right? That it felt so much more fluid because of that. That everything was so much more seamlessly done. I mean, this was just artistically impressive.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there was such an artistic value to what was being done that is not often seen in documentaries. That they're just focused on the story, but they're focused on, like, the storytelling as well, which is not often, I don't think.
Also really, really impressive, and I'm so glad that they did this, is that they, because their content and because their story takes place in the 80s, there's so much footage. So many interviews, so many
news reports
so
on
many people
television
that are just recording at the like in the city or in the town because they just have camcorders and stuff around them, and it makes for really, really easy to digest storytelling because it's not a documentary in that there's just always image to accompany. Whereas with Jonestown, there are some crazy images, but there aren't nearly as many videos and as many things to draw from because it just took place a tiny bit earlier, and there were so many fewer people that were dedicated to publicizing it. You know.
Oh God! I just ate my own spit. It's 2-minute warning, by the way.
No.
I don't know if you were aware. You looked at the computer, and I was like, "Oh, he knows it's a 2-minute warning." But then he was like, "You just kept going." Listen, this is a very good documentary. I'm happy that you suggested it. And you're staring at me.
Yes,
funnily.
yes, no. I'm listening.
But this is a very good documentary, and I'm impressed by like what was going on in the storytelling. And I'm surprised I never heard the story before, but it was so artistically done. I recommend this to everyone. Mac.
I totally agree. I think that every single person that is listening to this right now that is of decent age should absolutely watch Wild Wild Country. I think that
bad name though. It's not a good name. It's not a good name for a documentary.
It's a mouthful. Wild Wild Country. I just hate that.
Also, really
Wild
generic.
Country.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It doesn't tell you anything about what the actual piece is about. But highly recommended. Danny, with our remaining 23 seconds, what would you like for us to view or consume next week?
Okay, so this is going to be a sort of pseudo sequel to something that we've already consumed, which is very weird, but it's not a sequel at all in another way. So if you don't remember, we actually reviewed Dynasty Warriors, and if you don't know, Dynasty Warriors, the movie, was actually based off of a game, which was based off of a novel, and we are going to actually watch, with the same characters, of course, something that happens a little bit later in that same novel. It's going to be a movie directed by John Woo, and it's titled Red Cliff.
Thank you.